When I was young, maybe in junior high, I used to be afraid to get close to God because so many of the people I knew who were religious seemed uptight and repressed. They were the hand-wringers. They were always the hand-wringers. What if it's going to go wrong? Oh my gosh, you're getting too close to sin. They weren't a lot of fun. They seemed to have little room for the pleasures of this world in their lives. And so to me, they had this pinched look. I, on the other hand, have always loved and continue to love the pleasures of this world. If you know me, you know how true that is. Maybe that's why I like Irish people so much. Wherever the Catholic sun doth shine, there's plenty of laughter and good red wine. At least I've always heard it so. Benedicamus Domino. That's why Catholics are my kind of people. Epicurean is a word perhaps you could have used to describe Gary Brown. One of my philosophy professors in the seminary described me in a way I never heard up until then. He said I was a transcendental meta-hedonist. I wore the title with distinction. I love the pleasures of this world. If anything makes me a good confessor, and I say this after hearing 8 straight hours of confessions last Tuesday, if anything makes me a good confessor, it's that I get it. I get it. I get why we pursue the pleasure of this world to the point of addiction, perhaps, to the point of sin, maybe. Once again, defined as my life jumping off the tracks, missing the mark. I get it. In this parable we call the prodigal son, which is probably the most familiar story in all the Gospels, the younger son took his share of the inheritance and went out and enjoyed it. He enjoyed it with wine and women and song. Nothing wrong with any of those 3 things. And it was always so much easier to identify with that younger son than with that older guy, his older brother, who was working all day on the farm under the hot summer sun of Palestine. Now go figure. The kid who went out and enjoyed wine, women, and song, or the guy working on the farm under the hot summer sun? If you had to choose between those 2 lives, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I'd take eeny over mo any day. I'll take the hand extended, full of pleasures, any day over hard work. That's the truth. The older brother, the religious one, he had that pinched look, like I said. He responded to this whole affair. What's going on? There's work to be done here. We don't have time for this foolishness. Plus, it's wasting money. The story begs the question, what is the place of pleasure? What is the place of pleasure in life? People pursue pleasure. People like pleasure. People go wild over pleasure. If you were to poll humanity, I would bet that pleasure would be number 1 on the list of things that people like the most. Is the pleasure a good? Is the good a pleasure? Why else would people pursue pleasure so doggedly? And so the good is not some inscrutable, highfalutin, abstract, moral ideal. It's just mental and physical pleasure. Those are good things. Is the pleasure a good, or is the good a pleasure? One further observation, though. Pain is terrible. The alternative really does suck. Nobody likes pain, unless maybe it leads to greater pleasure. Even then, we don't really like it. Most people would say that pain is bad. So from this, you can get the idea that people should maximize their pleasure, because if they don't, in will rush anxiety, fear, grief, all the things we call pain, all the things that make life a bust. So does that mean that we should be going after pleasure 100% of the time? Does it mean that I need to indulge every passing desire I have? Does it mean that if this is good, more is better? No. Because that is where my little buddy in that story, that's where my little brother in that story went wrong. And that's where Gary Brown can go wrong too. Because someday the things that give us pleasure, like smoking perhaps, video games, fried chicken, alcohol, hooking up, or laying out in the sun for the sake of our beautifully toned skin, yes, they can feel great. Yes, those are pleasures. But someday, my friends, they will release a torrent of pain. And then you will have to not maximize your pleasures at all. As a matter of fact, there will be no pleasures at that point. Then you are just putting off the suffering. You're just putting off the suffering that will one day happen to you. Jesus, who at one point was accused of having too much fun and enjoying life just a little too much, too many of the pleasures of life, they accused him of that. He would say, yes, go for it. Go for the pleasures of this world. Enjoy. But don't be a jerk about it. Don't be stupid. And one way to not be a jerk about it or stupid, and it pains me to say this, is moderation. Yeah, that pains me to say. Moderation. It's a hard word to get really excited about. But I'd like to propose to you that moderation can actually maximize your pleasure and leave you content and free of pain. But moderation ain't easy. Moderation, that word never sounded like much fun, but what I've learned from this Jesus, what I've learned from my friends who do it well, and my young friend in this story, is that moderation is itself a pleasure redefined. And as a matter of fact, the virtues, all of them, including especially being of service to others in some way, are actually the deepest pleasures of all. Those are the abiding pleasures that I take to bed with me at night and wake up with in the morning, grateful for having experienced the day before. They're the abiding pleasures, the deepest pleasures of all. So I hope you can see that once again, Gary Brown had it wrong when he was a young man. Religion had not taken away the pleasures of life from me. It has actually opened up for me, and I hope for you over the years, all the pleasures of life and how to maximize them and how to trace them to the source of all that is good and true and beautiful and pleasurable. God. Thank you, younger brother, for showing me me.